Let's welcome Ed Earl.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Ed. Let me tell you a little bit about what I do. I am an owner's rep. So does anyone know what an owner's rep is? My guess is there's probably not too many of them around. There's not many in San Diego. So I am a professional consultant that's hired by homeowners that are either doing remodels, usually pretty complex remodels, or custom homes. And I serve as their representative, and I communicate and coordinate between the general contractor, the architect, the interior designer, everyone that's involved in the project. So that's the realm that I've worked in. I've been in construction for 25 years, but for about the past 15, I've been an owner's rep. So that's the perspective that I'm going to bring to you tonight, is that of the homeowner. And I think it's a really valuable perspective, no matter what. If you're a general contractor or a designer or manufacturer, I mean, we're all dealing with homeowners at some point. And so that's the perspective that I come from. I've had the opportunity to work on lots of different projects over the years, very large ones, smaller ones. This is Southern California, right? So it's a little bit different. But this is the biggest project I've done is this one, which is, believe it or not, this is a single-family home in Southern California. So this is a 27,000 square foot estate home. And it truly is, a single family does live there, believe it or not. Now they have 6 kids, so, you know, they kind of fill it up a little bit. But they have 12 bedrooms, 17 bathrooms, right? So every kid could use like a different bathroom and, you know, a different day of the week. So anyway, so that's one of the projects I'm gonna talk to you about. The next one is, I was involved last year in a safari camp rebuild in Africa. And so I'll tell you a little bit about that. And the last project I want to talk about is construction of a nunnery project at a local Buddhist monastery. And the project was actually constructed out of straw-bale. Now, I know that these 3 projects are unlike anything that you probably have encountered in your career. But hopefully by the end, you'll see that the challenges and the issues that I faced with these projects are really no different than a $50,000 kitchen remodel. And I'm going to talk to you about one of those as well. So let me just quickly go over the lessons that I'd like to impart tonight. The first is, as I said, focusing on the homeowner, but really realizing that many of the homeowners that we work with, they focus more on the process than they do on the final product. And that's, I think, really important because as construction professionals, we're all about that final product. But oftentimes we overlook that the process, it can be just as important. The next thing is to really understand our client, understand our homeowner and the perspectives that they're coming from, what's important to them, and to realize that they have a very different knowledge set than we do. The third concept is I have identified what I think are 2 real keys to building happy homeowners. And I'll talk to you what those 2 keys are. And then the last is I want to talk about a concept called collaborative construction. And collaborative construction is something that I've been practicing for the last 3 or 4 years, and I want to share with you what the idea is behind that. So I call these Zen lessons. Why do I call them Zen lessons? Well, because for about 20 years I've actually studied under a Zen master, and his name is Thich Nhat Hanh. Thich Nhat Hanh was actually nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize back in the 1960s by Martin Luther King Jr. And so I've had the ability to study under him for about 20 years. Now, people, when they hear Zen, you know, they think it's about going up on a mountain and meditating and reaching nirvana. But that's not what we're going to talk about tonight. And that's really not what I think is the applicable part of Zen. I think that there are many characteristics within Zen that are applicable to us as individuals as well as construction professionals. Some of these characteristics are analyzing situations, being able to see a different perspective than we ordinarily would, and communicating clearly. Some of the goals within Zen is really developing a greater awareness and a better understanding. And I think those are things that we can benefit from, again, as individuals and as professionals in the construction industry and helping work with our clients. So this is our goal for tonight, all right? We're going to build harmony with your homeowner. It's kind of got a little bit of a Zen feel to it. So I'm not going to burn any incense. We're not going to do any chanting. I'm only going to say Om once, and I just said it. So, but what I hope that you'll be able to see is that this Zen perspective that I'm going to steer us through as we go through this and look at some of the projects. So I want to start with a Zen koan. A Zen koan is a riddle that's used to help Zen students gain a greater understanding. So you've probably heard the most famous one is, what is the sound of one hand clapping? So I can't tell you the answer to that. I think I need another 20 years before I could get you the answer to that one. But I'm going to tell you what my koan for tonight is when is a successful remodeling project not a success? So I don't know if any of you have had these situations before, but I have, where you're focusing on this job and you really think it's going well, and you've built, by the time you're done with this project, you've built this great quality project, and it's just really, you're really proud of what happened, and it's just great quality. But at the end of the day, that quality construction doesn't equate to a happy homeowner. Has anyone had those circumstances before? Okay, yeah. So let me just, if I can ask a couple of you to kind of share with me, maybe you can share kind of what the situation was and what it was that went wrong.
Yeah, I thought things were going along just perfectly. I worked really hard to get this project within her budget. And the last day when I went to get my check, I was given a letter of all the things that I did wrong and all the trouble I caused her during the project. I was totally flabbergasted. I had no idea that these things were becoming an issue. One of the things was her son was home to visit, and he was in the service, and we continued coming at 8 o'clock in the morning, and our saws would interfere with his sleep. But she never told us that while we were doing this. I mean, I would have been happy to start an hour later and work an hour later. We could have done that. But there was no communication on her part either. So it taught me a lesson about communication, though.
Okay, that's a big one, communication, for sure. Okay. All right, well, let me tell you about my story. So this is my $50,000 kitchen remodel. A gorgeous project. And the cabinets, by the way, were just refaced, so we didn't have to go, so that was how we kind of made that budget. But this is my #1 hit on Houzz. It sounds like I've talked to a few of you. You guys all know about the Houzz website. So I get, like every day, I get 2 or 3 hits on this project. I mean, it's just the biggest, for me, it's really the most successful project that I have on Houzz. But the interesting thing is that the contractor, when he finished the job, again, gorgeous job, but he parted ways with the homeowner and he's never spoken with him since. And so obviously for him, it is not a successful job because he got no referrals out of it and he just has no connection with the homeowner. So what went wrong? Well, it wasn't that the quality was bad. I mean, you can see from these pictures, this is a gorgeous project. It was just that the contractor really didn't interact well with the homeowner. He didn't build a rapport with the homeowner. He just never really worked on that. He was worried about that product, but he just kind of worked right over the homeowner. And you can see the dog back there in the picture. That was part of the problem. Some way, about halfway through the job, I don't know what happened, but the dog got scared of the contractor. So every time the contractor would come, Xenia would go run to the other end of the house and go under the bed, which just freaked out the homeowner as well, because he didn't know what happened. He was so concerned. So it's kind of ironic, but at the end of the day, this beagle had more to do with determining the success of the project than the quality of the construction. So that's something that we have to keep in mind. So here's the Zen lesson out of that, which is that a homeowner often judges the success of a project by focusing on the construction process rather than the final product. So that's something that I think we all deserve to be reminded of, and to realize that it's not always about the finish line, but it's about the steps that we take to get there. And so many times I think we get so focused on that finished product and bringing it in on budget and on time, and that's important, but you've got to realize that the homeowner is also focused on the process, and for them that's critical as well. So the next Zen lesson is that as a result of that, we know we need to understand the homeowner's perspective and recognize, again, the Zen a lesson of different people have different perspectives. So one of the things that I think is important for us to know is that, you know, homeowners don't have the experience that we have in construction. So, you know, they have little to no experience about construction projects, and they don't realize that it's not like buying a product at a store. You know, it's not like they just go out and buy this product and boom, they bring it home and they've got a brand new kitchen. So, you know, and it's not that way in so many different ways. First is that there's not one price, right? They'll ask 3 different contractors and get 4 different prices for their kitchen, and they don't understand how that can happen. Secondly, you know, they don't even know what they have until it's done. So that's a huge source of anxiety for them because they never really know for sure that they're getting what they want. And also the fact that it takes a long time to get to that final product. It's not something that can come home for the store even in a week or two. It's something that takes, you know, many weeks, months, maybe even years in certain circumstances. So all of those can really cause a homeowner to approach a construction project with anxiety that we don't have as a construction professional, right? Because we know how it's going to turn out. We know that it's a long process. We know all of that. But our homeowners don't, because most of them have never done this before. So another thing that comes up with homeowners is this mistrust of contractors, right? Whether we want to acknowledge it or not, we unfortunately have a reputation in the construction industry as being dishonest. Now, I think Nari has done a great job of really trying to overcome that, but I don't think we've eliminated it. You know, unfortunately, too many people have seen those reality TV shows with the rip-off contractors, and that's just, you know, somewhere in the back of their minds. The third thing that we need to understand from the homeowner's perspective is that, you know, we're dealing with a valuable possession. We're dealing with their home, which for most people is their most valuable asset. So that puts a lot of stress on them as well, because this project is going to affect the value of their most valuable asset that they'll probably ever have in their life. It puts a lot of pressure on that. And then we also have to realize that we're coming inside of their homes and we're getting into their most intimate spaces. You know, what are the 2 most common areas that we remodel, right? They're the kitchens and bathrooms, 2 of the most private spaces in a person's homes. You do a kitchen remodel, you completely disrupt that household, right? That's not just their family dinner, but it's where the kids do their homework, it's when they go down to get a snack and fix breakfast. It's their whole routine is disrupted when you do a kitchen remodel. And sometimes we don't think of that. You know, we're just going to work. We don't realize that we're going in and disrupting a family. So one of the things that I do at the beginning of my project is I send an introductory email. And in this introductory email, I want to do a couple of things. One is I want to try to help the client, the homeowner, to understand why they have these uncertainties and anxieties and help explain what I've just outlined. But I also want to try to find out more about my client. I want to find out what's important for them, how I'm going to communicate with them. One of the first questions I ask is, what's their preferred contact method? So we all know in today's world there's lots of different ways to contact people, right? So let's take my wife, for example. If I was to call her right now, even though she knows I'm here, and left her a voicemail message, when I get home tomorrow, I can almost guarantee you she will not have heard that message. But if I pull my phone out right now and text her, like maybe send a picture, I'll get an instant response. And now, if I take my dad, on the other hand, you know, if I send my dad a text, he can't even reply back because he doesn't even have a keyboard on his phone. So you have to know how people communicate. You know, I find, at least in Southern California, housewives, nowadays it's all about texting because that's how they communicate with their kids and the fellow moms. So I know that. But, you know, if the husband is a professional, he does not want me to be sending him a text message in the middle of his business day. He wants me to either send him an email, call him, leave him a voicemail message. Sometimes, I'm actually working with one CEO right now that loves to text me. And I don't know how he does this, but he's texting me all day long. But I knew that from the beginning because I sent this email out and he told me that that was his preferred method. So I think we all kind of figure it out during a project. You start to figure out the best way to reach your client. But what I find is it's better to ask that at the beginning of a job rather than spend the first however many weeks trying to figure out the best way to communicate with them. The next question that I ask my homeowners is, what's their decision-making process? You know, who am I going to look to make the decisions, right? So first, the most common, of course, is the husband makes all the decisions. The second is the wife makes all the decisions. So I've only had this happen once. So I've been dying to ask this question. Has anyone had a project here where the wife made all the decisions? Wow, that's awesome. You see, look at this. Minneapolis, Minnesota, liberated women. I like to see that. I'm going to have to bring that back to Southern California. So the third one, which I hear lots of times, is, well, you know, the husband, you know, he's going to take care of the budget questions, and the wife, she'll take care of the design decisions. So we all know that's a recipe for disaster, right? And so you know, when I hear that, I have to make a conversation about that so that they understand that that's not a real workable condition. The third thing that I ask them about is, what level of communication do they want? You know, do they want to be copied on every email? I have certain clients and they want to see every email that I send out, and that's fine. And others, they're just so busy, they just say, look, don't send us an email unless you need a decision. If I get an email from you, I know that you need some kind of direction or decision, so I'll respond. So by the end of this email, I've got a very good idea of my homeowners and what they're gonna need and want. Okay, my next Zen lesson: make sure that your decision makers are on the same page. Usually, our decision makers in a home remodel or husband and wife, they don't necessarily have to be. You know, sometimes I've had ones before where the father is making the decisions. It's the couple's doing it, but the father's paying for it. So now the father's got to be involved as the decision maker. But they need to be on the same page. But when it comes to husbands and wives, I think it's really important. You've probably all seen the studies that say that, you know, a home remodeling project is one of the most stressful things that a couple can go through. And it's right up there with, you know, losing a job or one of the spouses having an affair or trouble with the kids. So, you know, I tell my couples sometimes, I say, you know, do you know what the most expensive part of a construction project is? Does anyone want to guess? Therapy? Therapy's close. So, you know, I usually get, well, it's the cabinetry or it's the flooring or whatever. I say, no, it's the divorce. So that's the one cost in a construction project you want to avoid, if at all possible. And you can really help to do that by making sure that your husband and wife stay on the same page. Emails are great for that. I always CC the spouse, even if they tell me they don't need to. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot, I put her on there as well. I'm going to share with you a little example. I'm going to go back to my little home here in Southern California and tell you a story about this. So this is the big estate home. So this was an interesting situation because the husband had hired the general contractor and the wife had hired the interior designer. So I could just stop right there, right? You know the punchline at this point, right? But let me tell you a little more because it's kind of interesting. So the homeowner, the husband had this great idea to motivate the builder to build value. And so he put together this very unique bonus program to motivate the general contractor. This was his plan. At the end of the project, he was going to have the property appraised. And then he was going to have the general contractor participate in 1/3 of the difference in the value of what the house was worth versus what it cost to build. So he had this great plan to really motivate the general contractor to save money. Because if he could cut 30 grand out of the budget, that was $10,000 in his pocket. But he had to do it in a way that wouldn't decrease the value of the property. So the wife, meanwhile, she's working with this interior designer, and the wife had very expensive tastes. And the interior designer was just designing things that were just amazingly complex and just really detailed. And I could see right away that the wife was not concerned about building value. She was concerned about building Versailles, I think, at this point. So finally, I had to sit down with the husband, and I talked to him, and I said, look, you're going to have to make a decision here. You know, you're either going to have to rein in your wife and fire that interior designer, or you're going to have to side with your wife and go back to the general contractor and renegotiate your deal with them. So he said, okay, I'll think about it over the weekend. I'll give you a call on Monday. So gave me a call on Monday. Like all good husbands, what did he decide? He's sticking with his wife. So I said, okay, we got to meet with Brian, our general contractor. We did. We renegotiated his deal. We basically just gave him a flat fixed fee based on just the cost of the job and not any kind of a percentage. So the good news is that they're still happily married today. And they ended up with an incredible house. This house came in, by the time we were done, it was close to $1,000 a square foot. So this is her closet. So hand-carved cabinets here. We've got gold inlaid, detailed moldings. The knobs on the handles, those are crystal. They aren't just crystal, they're Swarovski crystal. So I'm sure you guys build these kind of closets all the time here, right? So every wife should have one of these. And you could imagine the clothes that you put in there. You know, you can't just put an old pair of sneakers and a pair of ripped up jeans in a closet like that. This is the kitchen. This kitchen was actually featured on HGTV's $1 Million Rooms. And if you add up the cost of all of that custom cabinetry work and the very rare Italian marble countertops and the 15 gourmet appliances, you actually get into the 7 figures. So this is the one of 4 stoves that are in the kitchen. This is a French gourmet cooking stove. So it's just for baking pastries, and it costs more than a sports car. So the owner, the husband, is actually a professional poker player. So you may have seen him. He's been on the World Series of Poker and a few things like that. So of course we had to build him a casino room. So this is his home office. So I don't know if he can write it off or not, but this is his home office. This is the bar top for the casino, backlit with onyx and just, you know, tons of gold and silver leaf. The project took 5 years to build. And once we got the husband and the wife on the same page, they were great clients. But I've also had the difficult clients, right? The ones that we've talked about before. And over the years, what I've learned is that I can oftentimes classify a difficult client just by asking them one question. What do you do? So I have found that there are certain professions that have people that you just know are going to be difficult clients. So I want to know, what's the deal here in Minnesota? I want to see some hands. Give me who you had your most difficult client and what was their profession.
He was Vice President of Global Customer Excellence.
Global Customer Excellence. Okay, but a VP. All right, so a VP. Who else?
Engineers. Yeah.
Engineers. Okay. What else?
Tax accountant.
Tax accountant. All right, that's a good one. I like that.
Any attorney.
Attorney. Okay. Heart surgeon. That's a good one. Wow. Engineers. We already had engineers. I'm going to underline engineers. Heart surgeons. Pardon my writing. A documentation writer. Wow. Yeah. So almost like an engineer, it sounds like. I mean, very detail-oriented people. Wow. Okay, anything else? It looks like things aren't much different than they are in Southern California, I'll tell you that. So here's my list. Number 1 on my list, engineers, for sure. And the reason is because an engineer is so detail-oriented, and they're used to really completely understanding what they're working on, right? They're experts in their field. And then go back to what I was saying earlier. Unless they're an engineer that's related to construction, they don't know much about construction. And that's very, very difficult for them to deal with because they're so used to knowing exactly what's going on. So throughout the whole process, they're going to be struggling with this lack of information, the uncertainty related to it. They don't really know what they're going to get until the end of it. So it's important to recognize that when you get an engineer as a client.
There's another problem with engineers. There's another problem.
What?
They're never done engineering.
They're never what?
They're never done engineering.
They're never done engineering. You're right. Yes. Right. More, yeah, he's saying, if you can hear him, he's saying they have a lot more change orders. That's exactly right. Yeah, because they're always redoing things and rechanging things. Yes,
do for a living.
that's what they do for a living, exactly. Okay, number 2 on my list is doctors. So I think for much of the same reason, you know, a doctor is used to really being the expert in their field, really knowing what's going on. And I had a surgeon last year that I worked for, and he lived in Phoenix, and he bought a vacation home in San Diego. So that made it even more challenging because of that. But I kept telling him, I kept saying, look, Dr. A, this is not surgery. This is a different process, you know. We can't know exactly what's there. We can't, like, x-ray the walls. I guess we could, but, you know, we didn't know that that gas line was there. Yes?
Doctors are always sure that they're being charged too much.
Yes. Yeah, that's interesting, too. And that's kind of what I think. My third on my list is lawyers. And I think, again, it goes back, remember what I was saying about the perceptions that the homeowners have. And I think, again, with attorneys, they're so used to protecting people, making sure they're not being ripped off, and here they are dealing with this corrupt industry. So, you know, even just trying to negotiate a construction contract with an attorney, you know, that's hard enough. Okay, number 4 on my, yes?
I had my attorney become a client and he wouldn't sign his own contract.
Wow. Wow, that's great. That is awesome. He wouldn't sign his own contract that he drafted. That's great. That's awesome. All right, number 4 on my list isn't really a profession. It's kind of a lack of profession, but it's a retired person, right? Retired people. They have lots of time on their hands. They can think about stuff. They're at the job more than you are. And then next on the list, I didn't put this on, is really the combination. You know, there's only one thing worse than a retired person, and it's a retired engineer, right? Or a retired doctor, or a retired a lawyer. So, but you know, my point here is not to say, okay, never take a job with an attorney or an engineer or a doctor. Really, my point is that, you know, difficult clients are not always to be avoided. Some of my best clients are my difficult ones, like the surgeon that I had from Phoenix. He was a really tough cookie, but he now is the top of my referral list. He just, you know, is the greatest referral. So really, don't be scared away from difficult clients. I think my message is to just recognize in advance who you're working with. And if it's an engineer, have that conversation about change orders early on so that they understand what's going to happen as they do change orders. You know, have the conversation with the doctor about the uncertainties of construction and how you can't really know what's behind those walls until you open it up. You know, and it's not like the human body where the bones are in the exact same place on every home. It doesn't work that way. So I think if you go into it that way, it can help. And I think, too, you have to realize that it's just part of your job. You know, that you aren't just building a construction project, you're also building a relationship with a client. And so if you change your perspective, again, here we go with perspective, it'll change the way you approach it. So if you have a difficult client and you're kind of resentful of it and you're going, God, I can't believe I've got to go and explain this to him again. I wish I could just get past this all and just build this thing. You know, it's kind of like saying, well, I just wish I could just get past framing and just put the finishes in. You can't do that. You've got to go through all the stages. And it's the same thing with a client. So if you approach it that way and have that perspective, it can help you to turn what can be a difficult client into one of your best referral sources. Okay, so this is the goal that I would say for all of us. We're building happy homeowners as well as quality projects. So how do we do that? How do we build happy homeowners? Well, I feel like there are 2 keys to building a happy homeowner. The first one we talked about when we were talking about projects and what went wrong with them, and that's clear communication. To me, in the 25 years that I've been doing this, clear communication is so important. Clear communication with our homeowners, with our subcontractors, everyone that's involved. It's really critical. The second for me is managing clients' expectations. Something that you have to do from that very first meeting that you have with the client. Because if you don't set up the right expectations, you're never going to end up with a happy homeowner. Okay, so let's talk about clear communications first. You know, in today's modern world, we're fortunate, it could be a blessing and a curse, but we've got so many different ways to communicate with people. And I really think that you need to use as many as you can, but know when to use them and how to use them. So I've listed 5 of them here. the 5, I think, most common ones. And I've listed them from the fastest to the slowest. But they're also listed in the same order of the amount of information that you can convey, from the least amount to the most amount. So obviously a text message is the fastest way to communicate to someone, but it's the least amount that you can communicate to them. Where a written document is going to take you a long time to put together, but it's really the only way that you can actually explain something in greater detail. Now, you're going to have site meetings with people, you're going to have phone conversations, you're going to have decisions that are made, and choices that are made. But I always encourage my contractors to, after you've had that conversation or after you've had that site meeting, to go back and document that in writing. Write an email, write a document, because my adage is, if it's not in writing, it doesn't exist. So whether it's intentional or not, people forget things, and I just think it's very important with all of, especially now with emails. You know, you can just, you have that meeting, put it down in an email, make sure you CC the spouse, and then you're covered and you know that it's been documented. The third thing with clear communication is utilizing technology. So I'm sure everyone has a smartphone, right? That's like the most important tool in our industry today. But it wasn't always like that. I remember when I showed up 10 years ago with my first smartphone. It was a Trio. Did anyone have a Trio? It was like an upgraded Palm Pilot. And I remember going to the job site, and like I was so proud of it. And I went to the general contractor, a guy who'd been doing this for 30 years. I said, Brian, I have this new device. I can send and receive emails from the job site. And he looked at me and he said, Ed, why in the world would you want to do that? That just gets in the way of building. So now, 10 years later, Brian has a smartphone and he uses it all the time. But another tool that is starting to be used, and I think is a really important one as well, is a tablet or an iPad. How many of you here use a tablet or an iPad in your business? Yeah, okay. I think in another 5 years, everyone's going to have them as much as smartphones. Either that or the smartphones, you know, they just kind of keep getting bigger. They're going to be one and the same device. But one of the things that I use my iPad for quite a bit is a cloud-based construction management system. So is anyone using a cloud-based construction management system? Okay. A few of you? Yes. I use Builder Trend. So I started about 2 years ago using one. So as you heard at the beginning, I'm also a business coach. And so I work with a lot of general contractors, and I've helped many of them in evaluating cloud-based construction management systems. So I've looked at a bunch of them. If you want to have me, I can talk to you about them afterwards. But one of the greatest things I like about a cloud-based construction system is that everyone is accessing the same information in the cloud. So everyone's looking at the most updated set of plans, the most recent specs. You don't have the problem of someone looking at an old plan set. I like to say everyone's singing from the same hymn book, right? So everyone's got the same melody going on at the same time. And then it's so easy to access that information. You can pull it up on your smartphone, your tablet. The homeowner can pull it up on their computer. You can pull it up on your laptop. So this is, yes?
With your construction management program, what kind of resistance are you seeing from the trade partners? We're all general contractors.
Yeah, right.
What about the trade partners?
Right. So that's a great question. You know, the trades are very slow to adopt this. Yep. And so the way that I work it is I can control it from my side, and I get the general contractor bought in. And I have to kind of gradually show the trades the benefits of it. So let me tell you, I'll give you one example right now. I was doing the kitchen remodel for that surgeon, and the plumber was there, and when he was doing his safe off, and we opened up one of the walls and realized there was a gas line going through the kitchen. So typically you'd say, okay, well, go home, get us a change order, and we'll have you come back later. So instead, we got on this program. He took a couple of pictures of the gas line. We got into this change order program. He filled out the change order, put the price in, put it all together, and sent it off. And then I called up the homeowner, the surgeon, got him in between surgery, said, hey, you know, we found this gas line. This is what it's going to be. He could pull it up on his phone. He saw the pictures, the pricing, and then he could actually approve the change order. He actually signed on his phone that change order. And the plumber had gone to lunch. I could then call the plumber up and say, hey, pull up on your phone. We got a signed change order. You can come back and do that gas line. So he was able to do it in the same day. And so he was really excited. I said, God, this is great. So that was how I kind of got him more interested in it. But the system works even if you don't have all the subs on. It works much better if you have all the subs on. But these are all the different things that you can work on: bids, budgets, schedules, plans, email messages, finish selections, daily updates, progress photos, change orders, punch lists. The subs really are on the bidding part of it. Subs, sometimes I'll get them in and they'll see schedules and budgets, but they don't necessarily have to run the whole job through there. But really, a cloud-based construction management system, I would highly recommend exploring it. It's definitely a great time saver and will make your job much more efficient. Okay, so let me talk now about another unique project I had. Usually when I take jobs, you're probably the same way, you've got to have them within driving distance so that you can go to the job because you go there all the time. With this job, this was how I got to the job. So this was a little bit of a longer commute. And so not only did I fly all the way to Africa, but then I'd hop in this single-engine plane and fly out into the Kalahari Desert in the middle of Botswana. And then once we landed, then we'd hop in this safari jeep and head out to the safari. So one of the things that struck me once I was there was realizing that the construction means and methods are very different in Africa. And there's not very much regulation. Obviously, there's no OSHA fall protection on this re-roofing project here. So the guys are just out there just doing it. And there's very little documentation. There's not a lot of blueprints and plans. These guys are setting a foundation. You can see they basically just pulled their strings and set their posts, and they're just going at it. But the interesting thing is that although the construction means and the methods are so different, that key component of communication is still there. It's just as important. I had to change the way I communicated. I couldn't be sending text messages and emails as much, but that communication was just as important, even halfway around the world. So the way the safari camp works is it's in a national park in Botswana, so you can't build any permanent structures. So everything is constructed out of canvas tents that are actually disassembled at the end of the year. So we start by building a wooden platform. We can get away with building that. That's the only permanent structure that we can have. And then we set up these metal poles, and then they go in and hang these canvas tents up. And when they're done, it's actually pretty nice. This is the dining hall in one of the safari tents. So it does not, you really wouldn't think that you're in a tent in the middle of the desert. Even the swimming pool is tented so that people can enjoy a nice swim without the intense sun of the African. So this is it. It's these tents that are literally in the middle of the Kalahari Desert in Botswana. But again, you go halfway around the world, people are people. They have the same issues, the same communication challenges, the same approaches that I used for my construction management in Southern California were just as important in Southern Africa. Okay, so let's go on to back to my keys of building a happy homeowner. We've already talked about clear communication. So the second one is managing clients' expectations, and that's something that you have to do from the very beginning. You can fall off a little bit on the clear communication at the beginning of a job, but managing clients' expectations, you've got to do that from the very beginning. So one of the things that I like to tell my clients at the beginning of the job is for them to envision that their remodeling project is like a prototype. It's not like buying a car. When Ford goes and puts out a new model, they've done, hundreds of prototypes, right? They've tried this car out, they've run it around, they've made changes along the way, and most of the products that homeowners buy are like that. But a remodeling project is not, right? We have one chance to get this right. And it's also, I don't care how many kitchen remodels you've never done that particular one before. You've never done that one with all of the same challenges that you're going to have. And so a homeowner really doesn't realize that. But once they see that as a prototype, they realize. And also realize that we only have one chance to get it right. We can't be like Ford and make our changes and then go back and redo the job again. And not only do we only have one chance to get it right, we don't even really know what we have. Until we open those walls up, we aren't for sure, we don't know what we're working on. And in addition to that, we're having a hard time to try and figure out what the homeowner wants because oftentimes they're changing their mind along the way. So we've got a lot of challenges here. And it's important for the homeowner to understand that and they have a more realistic expectation going into it. The second thing that I explain to the homeowner is that any remodeling project is an emotional roller coaster, right? There's highs, there's lows. I love this chart done by a colleague of mine, David Lupberger. I think, have any of you heard of David? I think David's spoken here before. He wrote a book called The Emotional Homeowner. Great guy. I use this all the time. I send this to every client at the beginning of the job, and I just say, look, here it is. You're going to have ups and downs along the way. And sometimes they'll look at it. Oftentimes they forget about it. The CEO in Orange County that I'm working for right now, I just sent this to him last week because I can tell he was really getting discouraged. We're in the drywall stages. He's already had 2 change orders, so his budget's going up. And he cannot see the end of the tunnel. You know, he's so down. So I sent this to him. I said, Michael, you know, look where we are. We're on this downward spiral here. We're right down here at drywall. And it's going to keep going down until we get all the drywall hung and all of it sanded. So just be prepared because it's going to be a couple more rough weeks. But once we get there, then things are going to start looking up. Once we start installing your cabinets and we start putting in some tile and some of the finishes, you'll see the light at the end of the tunnel. And so it really helped him to be able to understand the process and to know that things were really going to get better. Another thing that I think is important in managing client expectation is the construction schedule. And getting the client to understand that the construction schedule is dynamic. It's not fixed. And I like to say, you know, the minute you print the schedule, it's out of date. And probably many of you do this. I know many contractors, when you make your presentation to your client, you give them the budget and you give them a schedule. And I always take that opportunity and I'll tell the homeowner, because what do? They look right to the bottom date, whatever it is, November 15th. And I'll tell them, okay, I just want to tell you right now, I'll take a bet. Any of you want to take a bet? I will bet you that this job is not going to be done on November 15th. And they look at me incredulously, and I say, you know, I don't know when it's going to be done. It may be before November 15th. It may be after, but I can almost guarantee you it's not going to be November 15th because so many things change along the way. And so right away, it just kind of shatters that expectation that they have that, you know, they're going to move in before Thanksgiving. And I think that that's important. And that's what I love about a cloud-based construction management system, because you can always update the schedule. I'm on my jobs every week updating the schedule. And I do that for 2 reasons. One, anytime the homeowner gets on the schedule, that's our best estimate at that point. But also, all of the subs can know as well that they're looking at the most recent schedule. So if they want to see, hey, when are they going to be ready for us to come out to hang sheetrock? If they look at that schedule, they know it's not the printed one that the contractor gave them when he signed their subcontractor agreement 2 months ago. So that can be very helpful. Another thing which I would hope probably you all know, but you want to explain to the homeowners, are in change orders, that you not only add dollars, but you add days to a change order. And that when you add to a scope of work, you're not just increasing the cost, but you're increasing the time that it's going to take. All right, so let me talk about my last point for tonight, and it's about collaborative construction. It's about building a team and working collaboratively. And it's a term that I call collaborative construction. I'm sure many of you practice this here. It's kind of like design build. It has some components of that. The best way that I use to, when I explain it to a homeowner, is to contrast it with the more traditional form of construction, which I call competitive construction. So competitive construction, I call it old school construction. You know, it's the idea that you go out and you get 3 bids from contractors because you can't really trust anyone to get you the best price. And there's all this secrecy and, you know, sealed bids and all this kind of stuff. And I think that just feeds into that reputation that we have, this lack of trust and open communication. So collaborative construction takes a different approach. All right, collaborative construction kind of turns that whole process on its ear. And it's really about trust, it's about open communication, shared objectives, really being open about those objectives, and ultimately building lasting relationships. So it's changing the process of construction. But I believe that by changing the process, you're also changing the end product. I think you end up with an end product that's much better, and oftentimes at a lower cost, because you can be more cost effective with a collaborative approach. So this is the 3rd project I wanted to tell you about. This is the straw-bale monastery project. So this is the team that we built for the straw-bale project. So myself, the architect, interior designer, general contractor, straw-bale builder, we put the whole team together at the very beginning. And the 3 nuns in the front, those were the sisters from the monastery that were the representatives for this project. And they knew absolutely nothing, you can imagine, they knew absolutely nothing about construction. Very, very different perspective. And I really thought it was going to be a challenge because here I'm dealing with these people that just know nothing about construction. But the amazing thing was they were grounded in Zen. They understood the importance of collaboration and working together and communication. And so when I talked about collaborative construction, they got it because it resonated with their principles, their Zen principles. The nuns were great too. They were super hands-on. Here they are actually stacking the bales of straw, helping with the process. But it was a nonprofit, so we had a very specific budget. We had to stay to a very specific budget. It wasn't necessarily a low budget because this was their perspective. People say, well, straw-bale is more expensive. And it's true, straw-bale is more expensive if you look at the 12 months that it takes to build it. But if you look at the 30 years that you own it, it's the least expensive way to build. And that's what the perspective was of the Zen monastics. They looked at it over what's going to be the cost of this over 30 years. They also look at it like the cost isn't just the money that we raise, the cost is the impact on our community and our environment. And so they have a much broader idea of cost as well. So, but still we had to be tied to a certain budget. And so this was my objective, that we design to a budget rather than designing to a concept. Very different than the approach where you draw the plans and then you go out and get 3 prices. So these are the steps that I followed. The first is that you build your team, which we talked about. The second is everyone's got to know that budget drives the design from the very start. So you start to do the design and then you modify the design with this open collaborative approach where everyone's involved. And the design definitely takes longer, there's no question about that. But one of the things that you avoid with that is you avoid this disappointment where when the architect draws the plans, the client tells them everything they want, the architect designs the plans, they think they're getting this great thing, and then they go cost it and figure out they can afford half of it. So if you start with building with the budget in mind, you avoid that disappointment. So I've written a little article I call A Better Way to Build, and I send that to my clients as well for them to help understand. I've got some copies if you're interested at the end. I can show it to you. I can give you a copy. So has anyone done any straw bale construction? Anyone familiar at all with straw bale? Couple, a little bit. I'll just give you kind of a quick overview just so you understand it. So the walls are a post and beam construction, so you want to keep those bays as open as possible because you fill those bays with bales of straw. And the great thing about it is it's a pretty low-tech process. Basically, anyone knows how to stack bales of straw. So we were able to have the volunteers come in as part of the community days and help to actually build the walls of the monastery. So it's kind of like an Amish barn raising. You can do that with any straw bale project. You can just invite your neighbors, friends, and help to build whatever structure you're building. Once you're done, it's pretty much just a solid packed wall of straw. The bales of straw are actually specially twined together to make them super compact together, and you just basically have that continuous wall of straw. Once you're done with that, then you put on a quick mesh, and then you apply earth and clay plaster to the inside of the walls. So you're not hanging sheetrock or paint. And the reason for that is that you've got to keep the walls have to breathe, have to allow the moisture to come out, because that's the one thing that you don't want is to trap moisture inside the straw bale. That's the one thing that can dissolve the straw bale. So there's the walls once the earth and plaster is done. The outside of it, basically the same. It's bales of straw, a little bit more structural to it. But because you have these walls that are 18 inches thick with straw, you have a super, super insulated structure. So it's really great for retaining heat in the winter and keeping things cool in the summer. So you can really take advantage of passive heating and cooling designs. And that's what this building did. These windows are all positioned and sized differently based on taking advantage of that passive heating and cooling. Then once you're done with that, you apply a lime-based plaster to the outside of the buildings. And then there's the finished product. And the interior, that's one of the meditation rooms. So it was actually, the nunnery was 4 buildings. There was like a bathroom facility and then a couple of dorms and then one room for the Zen master, and that was it. They were all centered around a courtyard. And the walls are actually curved. They were actually curved around a courtyard. So anyway, all right, so that's pretty much it. Let me just finish by summarizing the Zen lessons that we talked about tonight. The first one is that the process often impacts the homeowner more than the final product. And I think that's really important for us to all keep that in mind because that's something that we sometimes overlook. The second is understanding the homeowner has a very different perspective than we do as building professionals. They have a different experience and a different important values, and that's really important to keep in mind. The third is that it's important to use different methods of communication to really be effective in the job and to be willing to adopt new technology like cloud-based construction project management systems. Next is setting realistic expectations from the very beginning of a project. And then the last is working collaboratively and designing to a budget. So that's it. That's my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention. And I know that I stand between you and food, so I won't take long. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks, Ed.